Hi everyone,
Hello.
welcome to the 221 live stream. We'll go quickly through the status of the new versions, and then we'll talk about the new stuff in 221, and Raf will show you a demo of some effects and some new stuff. So first, regarding the versions, since last year we we went from 3 months versions to a version every 4 months. But this year we are going to resync that to better fit. Oh, I should switch to this screen. Yep. To better fit to the different events during the year. So right now we're releasing 221. Then for GDC, we won't have a GDC version this year. We'll be developing 222 up till June. So we'll show 221 at GDC. And then we'll release 223 in November. And this way we get, next year in 2026, we'll get a better 4 months sync with one version at GDC, one version for SIGGRAPH, and another version in November, and then this can repeat year after year. So we'll try to fit to this release cycle, which will be better, we think. But for 2025, we'll have 2 bigger versions instead of 3. Anyway, so going into the new stuff, regarding simulation and rendering, first thing I should mention regarding the new materials that we introduced in 220, we've had some feedback regarding the old additive versus alpha blending and the new way it's done. We're aware it's not super usable for that part, so we're going to discuss and think about how we can improve that for the upcoming versions. Right now 221 doesn't change anything, so it's still the exact same state as it was in 220, but yeah, we're aware of it, and we will think about how to improve that. So on the GPU simulation side and rendering side, you can now use the triangle renderers in GPU simulation. Before it forced the layers to fall back to CPU simulation. We also added the Atlas feature that was missing from the ribbon animated mask material. So yeah, it was the only material that was missing that for some reason. So it's now available in 221. And regarding samplers, we added a bunch of new functions and helper nodes to the curve sampler, mesh sampler, and animtrack. So for the curve, you can now use the sample constant speed node, which allows you to interpret a curve, a 2D or 3D curve, as a path in 2D or 3D space, and sample it so that the sample point will move at a constant speed along the curve. So that's useful if you want to, for example, do crowd agents that follow curves. You can make them move at a constant speed no matter what the tangents look like or how the curve is constructed, if it has sharp corners or whatever. And this node is implemented using a lower level concept, which is the geodesic cursor. So those 2 lower level nodes allow you to also sample the curve at a constant speed with a math-friendly name. That might not be VFX artist-friendly name. So yeah, we named it sample constant speed, but it basically wraps. This Raf will show you an effect that uses that afterwards. It will be clearer. On the mesh sampler side, there is a new small helper which allows you to fetch the vertex IDs of a triangle by giving the triangle ID. So you input the triangle ID, it outputs an int3 with the XYZ containing the indices of each of the 3 vertices. And on the animtrack side, you can now get the length and duration of each track in an animtrack. You couldn't do that before. You had to hard code it in the effect, so now it's clean, and you have a node for it. Yep. On the editor side, big one that was pretty annoying every time you upgraded to a new version. It's the clear shader cache that you don't have to do anymore. So this was fixed pretty recently. Because the way we stored shader hashes in the cache to see if the shader changed or whatever, there are some parts that contributed to the final shader source that was not hashed. So we changed the way we did this, and now every time you change the version, so you go from 220 to 221, it will invalidate the cache automatically and rebuild everything as needed. So you don't have to manually do it, which was pretty error prone. Some shaders might have worked if you didn't clear the shader cache, but some other shaders had weird artifacts or didn't load, or it was very confusing. So hopefully that's fixed now. Also, when you copy-paste attribute nodes in the graph, usually you would have, before 221, an annoying message box saying that some attribute properties are mismatching, and most often it was wrong. Nothing was mismatching, but you still had the annoying message box. So this is now gone. So we didn't just delete the message box, we fixed the mismatch. So you should almost never see it anymore. Also, when you were editing GPU simulated layers, it would asynchronously compile the layer, but then for an editor, a bit of editor UI, it would actually disassemble the shader synchronously in the frame and cause the entire UI to stall. So we fixed that. Now it doesn't stall anymore. Yeah, so it should be nicer to edit GPU simulation graphs. And also we did a small improvement in the asset picker. So that's the screenshot you see underneath here. So we added a few other information. Before it was just the name of the assets. Now we have the path of the folder they're in, and also depending on the asset type, some additional info. So here, in case of textures, you have the dimensions of the textures that are written next to it. You already have all the information in the tooltip, but it's a quicker way to see this. And also, you can now use a slash. So start the search with a slash to say you want to search the entire path, so including the folders. So here, slash com, so you can add a space or not, doesn't matter. It will search all the textures that have com in the name, but also whose folders have com in the name. So here it matches the common folder and shows all the textures in the common folder. Yep. And last part for me, it's the new stuff in the core lib, the new template nodes. So in the event graph, you had an event random switch node, event rand switch, that allowed you to set probabilities for different output events, and it would randomly trigger an output event based on those probabilities. We added an event switch node, which is very similar, looks the same, except you tell it explicitly which output to trigger. So you can wire this into an attribute or any kind of custom logic to route the input event into different parts of the graph. Yeah. So it takes an index from 0 to the number of outputs -1. So here I have 6 outputs. If I give it 5, it will trigger the last one, spawn 5. If I give it 0, it will trigger the first one, spawn. Also, there's a new animtrack transform node. So this is just a wrapper around the animtrack sample position orientation. And it takes an input position, the cursor, animtrack index, and it will transform the input position along the animtrack. So you can open it and look how it's done. You don't really need it. It's just a nice way to not have to drop a whole bunch of nodes to do it yourself. It's not a really new feature per se, just a new helper. Also, an interpolate triangle helper node. So this was added with the next one I'm about to talk about. It's a bit corner case, but sometimes it's useful when you have barycentric coordinates inside a triangle. You can just give the 3 values on the 3 corners of the triangles, the barycentric coordinates, and it interpolates all 3 and gives you the actual value at the point inside the triangle represented by those barycentric coordinates. So here it's called UV. It's not the UV of the mesh. It's the 0, 1 coordinates inside the triangle. And the last one, this will be released as a marketplace, as a separate marketplace package in the next few days. We did a test to sample VAT animations. So that's the vertex animation textures. If you use Houdini, you have the game dev, Houdini game dev tools, I think it's called.
Might be.
Yeah, that has tools to export vertex animation textures. So you give it an animated mesh. So here in this example, it's a cloth, and it builds a texture with for each vertex, for each frame, the offset of the vertex for the animation, and it can be played back very cheaply in the game engine, in the shader, just sampling this texture. So these nodes take this texture and allow you to sample the animation at a specific cursor in the animation and use that in the particle sim. So here on the middle GIF, you have the VAT meshes that are animated, and on the right you have the particles that sample those VAT meshes and display the position and normal. And on the right GIF, it's actually the dripping demo that we showed in at GDC 24, but running on the VAT meshes. So this dripping simulation requires the normal and tangent of the mesh. So here we wrapped it in a physics on VAT node that basically constrains the particle position on the VAT animated surface and handles gravity, wind, stuff like that. So you have particles flowing on the surface. Yep. So expect this in the next few days on Marketplace. And I think, yeah, that's also it. Let Raf take over.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. So now I'll take over and show you a couple updates that happened in the editor. So first of all, I'll start with the node graph that received a couple UX updates. So we'll take this explosion FX as an example. So the first one is a long request from our users. It's the ability to solo some nodes, so to only display one or a few selected nodes. Before, you already had the option to toggle or untoggle some nodes with Ctrl-T, but it could become tedious when you had a lot of different layers to only have the ones you wanted visible. So you would have to select all the other ones you don't want and untoggle them. So it could become, yeah, a bit long. So now you have the ability to only select one specific layer. And instead of pressing Ctrl-T as you would before, you can press Ctrl-Shift-T, and it shows this yellow box around the layer. And here, as you can see in the viewport, only the smoke flow layer is being displayed. You can also see here at the top that the S icon, S for solo, is being active. So if you want to untoggle the solo, you can either press Ctrl-Shift-T again, or press this small icon, and it will untoggle the solo and everything is back to normal. So soloing can work on layers. It can work on multiple layers as well. It can solo everything you have selected, basically. So if I only want to show the smoke floor, like maybe, yeah, those two flipbooks, I can select both of them. Ctrl-Shift-T, only toggle these two. And then you'll see that all the smoke on the ground, all the sparks are gone. And if I untoggle it, it's back to normal again with all the sparks. You can solo the layers inside this, at this level, but you can also solo some specific things inside a layer. If, for example, you have a couple of renderers inside a layer, you can solo them as well. And so if you have 5 renderers inside inside a layer, you can only display one of them. And here you can see the same white box around the renderer. And at the graph, at the layer level, you can see this dashed line yellow box that indicates that something inside this layer is being soloed. So you never lose track of why you're not seeing the complete effect. And as with the previous, you can unsolo everything. The other feature that we can show here is what we call wire portals. So it's a new way to basically clean up your graphs a bit. So So let me show you that. So if you, here you see we have some long graphs that can run from one side to the other of the graph. If you want to make things a bit tidier for whatever reason, you can right click on a wire and here click add portal, which can also be done by pressing Alt Shift. And here, if you click,
actually, this is a bug in the .0. It displays Alt Shift, but it's actually the shortcut for the pass-through.
Okay.
There is already a ticket to fix that in the patch.
Yeah, indeed. So it won't work, but at least you can right-click it, and then it creates these pass-through like visuals. So you have two halves of a portal, an input and an output, and you can see the link disappeared between both. And so it allows you to place like the inputs and the outputs wherever you want and have the space be cleared up a bit. You can also, if you want to rename both of the inputs and outputs at once, here by default they are named portal when you spawn them, you can press F2 to rename both at once. So here I'm working on the position, so I can just name it that. And you can see that both have been renamed, and now I can see that whatever is going through here will be a position, and here whatever is coming inside this small point A node is the position. If you highlight one of the inputs or outputs, it will output all the corresponding wire basically, so you never lose track of what you're working on. Here you can see that I made the portal move forward from the left to the right, but you can also place it wherever you want in the graph. So here, if for some whatever reason I don't want to have a long wire go back into this place, I can only use a wire portal here, and it will clean up my graph and avoid having a long wire crossing everything. So yeah, I think that's it for the UX. Well, for most of the UX upgrades that we did. Some of the things we can show regard the mesh importer. So I will take some meshes as an example. The first one is a pretty straightforward one, but it can be useful in various ways. Let's say you are importing your mesh that you created or downloaded from somewhere, and for some reason it has the normals inverted. So I can actually show you what it would look like. Here, if you download a mesh and you have the bad surprise that the normals are actually inverted, so all the faces are flipped and you can actually see the back face of the mesh. You see, it all looks super weird, and that's not how you will want it to look like. Sorry. You can simply click on import flip normals. So here I untoggle it and re-import the mesh, and then you can have basically just flip the normals and the faces and have the mesh work the way you want. It can also be used in some very specific cases where you would want to have a mesh with the faces inverted. But yeah, basically it allows you to not have to go back to a 3D modeling tool to create a duplicate of the mesh with the faces inverted. You can do it here, which can come in handy.
Yeah, for example, if you have a mesh that represents a volume inside which you want to contain particles, and your particles intersect, do a shape intersect, uses the shape intersect node, you might want to import the mesh with the flip normals, because otherwise the shape intersect will not intersect the mesh if the particles are inside. So it allows you to flip your mesh inside out to be able to do behaviors like containing particles inside. Yeah.
And so here, for instance, if you wanted to have particles inside this dragon, you could have it inverted as I have it here, and any particle inside, when raycasting, will hit something because they will hit the inside faces basically. Another thing we changed is for importing anim tracks. So anim tracks is a way to sample tracks inside PopcornFX, and depending on how you created the anim track, which software you used, which 3D modeling software you used to create it, how you exported it, how you exported the animation basically, there are various ways to, various workflows to use, and a lot of ways that you can mess it up basically, because there are different settings, different engines and everything. And so before that, it could be a bit tedious and you had to fiddle a bit to find the exact right way to export your anim tracks to have them work here. Now we found a way to make things sometimes easier for you. So if you go in the mesh importer to animation advanced, okay, I have it open already. You can see a couple new options here. The first one being import all anim stacks. So basically, before that, the way anim tracks were detected by the importer could vary a bit, and sometimes you would have an animation exported, but it would not be visible here due to how it might be nested inside some other children or parent layers inside your modeling engine, for instance. Now you can hit this import all anim stacks and then re-import to basically force the importer to gather everything that might resemble an animation. And so you're sure, well, mostly assured, I suppose, that you will have the anim track that you try to export, even if the workflow wasn't the exact right one. It might happen then that you end up with a lot of anim tracks. So, because there could be some duplicates being created because of those nesting layers that I mentioned. So you have a few options here to reduce the amount. First of all, being merge duplicated animation paths, which in the case of the importer detecting some duplicates, it will just try to mash them all into one, so you reduce the amount of duplicates it imported. And you also have the option here to select which animation index you want to import. So if you have a lot that actually are detected by the importer, you can just go through all of them and check if you want the index 0 or 1 or 2, and yeah, see which one is the right one. So it might not be the ideal workflow, but at least it can help you avoid moving back and forth between Popcorn and Blender, for instance, if you want to simply import your anim tracks and not lose time during this step. So we hope it can be useful in your process.
Yeah, we tried to make it work perfectly and we failed. So we added this as the sledgehammer option.
Yeah.
Import everything, and hopefully the one you want is somewhere inside. But at least it shouldn't be frustrating in the way that you see the anim track in your 3D software, but it's nowhere to be seen in Popcorn. Here, checking that box should just show you at worst too many tracks, and at best the one you want. Yeah.
In lack for better standards. So yeah. So here is just a visual example of what Julien was telling you about the
constant speed.
The constant speed sampling. Yeah. So you can see here the 3 different layers that are sampling the track in different ways, and each color in the node graph corresponds to a color in the post-its. So you can see here that in this specific track, the red one, which was the red point here, which was the old way to sample the track, varies a lot in speed. The number you can see displayed above is the speed. That's like the current speed of the point. And you can see it varies a lot between sometimes under 0, and here it has some very steep turns, and the tangents make it so that while sampling the curve, it can go up to 2 or even 3. Are those meters per second? I don't know.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, 3 meters per second. And so you can see that the speed is changing drastically if there are too many sharp turns. As Julia mentioned, if you have, for instance, some NPCs following a path, you wouldn't want them to suddenly rush if they are turning around a corner or something. So before that, you can see the green point here, which was one of the ways to manually force the sampling to be more linear, or to be actually non-linear, I think, but to have it to have a constant speed. And now, in addition to the old way of doing things, which was basically this setup that you can see here. So that's the green dots.
The blue one is behaving weirdly. I'm curious to see what's inside the layer.
Yeah, I think it doesn't have the thing.
Oh yeah, we did tests before the live stream, and we saved this file apparently. Yep.
And so here you can see the blue one here that has mostly constant speed. So using the new geodesic length, and the curve over time constant speed option, it allows you to, without having to do any specific setup or any kind of template, to have a constant speed sample around your curve. So it can be done very, very easily now.
Yeah. Can you just quickly put the scale back at 1.5?
Yep.
Because here in the viewport, you will see the value, the displayed value vary quite a bit.
Oh, yes.
But it's actually because the way the speed is computed and displayed, it's taking the previous position of the particle, the current position, and computing the length, and based on the time step of the frame, it displays the speed. But this is the discretized way to display the speed, and it's actually the way used by the manual constant speed, which is imprecise. So the way it's displayed makes it look like the manual constant speed layer is almost perfect, whereas actually the blue one is perfect, but due to the way the speed is computed and displayed, it looks like it's not perfect, but actually it's the right one.
Yeah.
If this makes sense.
So yeah, that's it for constant speed sampling. Can be useful in various ways. And the other big updates to some nodes inside the editor is the resting state that we added to particles. So come closer. So basically, we added the option to have particles enter a rest state whenever you're computing physics inside the layer. You can set a velocity threshold, and here you can. I don't want it to wake, do I? Oh, I want this by default. Sorry. So back to it. Here, yeah, you can see that we have the auto rest being ticked to on, and the mean speed before rest being 0.03. So basically, whenever the speed of a particle reaches something under 0.03, it goes to a resting state. The resting state here means that the physics won't be computed at all, so it will stop being computed altogether. And it can be useful, especially if you want here to have maybe some impacts or some debris that are scattered around the scene. You want them to bounce a few times, but then you want them to stop bouncing but still be visible on the scene. But you don't want them to keep computing their physics. You want to save some perfs. Here it allows you to do exactly that. They are in a resting state, so they are not using computing any physics anymore, but they are still visible in the scene.
Also, a small additional benefit about that. Sometimes when the little rocks or debris settle on the ground, when there are frame rate spikes, without this, you would see them like a jitter on the ground. And obviously, when it enters the resting state, because it stops all the movements, it will also fix this issue, and they won't jump back up anymore when there's a frame rate spike.
So now, in case you want them to go into a resting state, but you also want them to be reactivated, well, you can reactivate them by using the force wake input, first of all. But if you want them to auto wake, it's possible as well. So you can have this auto wake option. Let's enable that for now. I don't really have any specific example here because there's no wind in the scene. You could have them sample the wind, for instance, and they are constantly sampling the wind. And whenever the wind or whatever force is being applied to them is higher than the threshold, the wake threshold that you put here, 0.25, then they go back into their physics state, basically. So yeah, that's an option to have things being handled automatically. And for example, fallen leaves on the ground, they can be into a sleep state, and when the wind is hard enough, they get blown away again. That could be a kind of use case. We also added this option that's here, a probe ground for wake, which allows you to
maybe show it before.
Yeah, I should show it before actually. So, right. In some cases, you might have the ground move out of the way, like the ground moves, or they are being put to sleep on top of an object and the object disappears. And here you can see that if I remove the ground, basically they'll start floating because their physics aren't computing anymore, so they're just staying where they are basically, and it looks a bit weird. So to avoid that, we added an option to have them rest, but then also auto wake and probe the ground as well. And if you're using that, whenever you move the ground, it will wake them back up again because they will notice that something moved, and then they recalculate their physics until they stop moving again. So right now, if you have this enabled, you won't really be saving any perfs because they will keep checking for the physics or checking for the ground if it's still below them. So you won't be actually saving perfs by putting them to sleep, but you will have the jitter thing mostly solved, and it allows you to basically automatically wake them up. And it's not the case right now, but in the future we'd like to have the ground probe to be able to be at a lower exec rate, so that it doesn't probe every frame, but every few frames. Sorry, so you at least save some perf on checking what's beneath them. I think that's it for me for the editor updates, at least the main points. showing that actually. I think we'll switch to questions. If
yeah.
anyone has them.
It's all good for me as well. We always have a lag of
a few seconds.
A couple seconds. And as usual, if you have questions later on or when you watch the stream again, don't hesitate to drop in our Discord and we'll all be here and answer the questions you have there. Right. Well, looks like there are no questions. Thanks for being here. And yeah, see you for the next one and maybe see you at GDC. I don't have the booth number on the top of my head, but we'll make a post on the Discord to let you know. Yep.
Thanks for watching. Bye.